Welcome back to episode 2 of the Whiskey Hour podcast. I'm your host, Phil Tross, and I'm joined by my esteemed brother, battle buddy, Jay McLovin. Again, our aim is to educate, innovate, and to inform you on your favorite everyday topics: sports, music, fashion, life, the whole gambit, right? Today, we're actually going to be talking about mental health. I'm an active duty service member. Jason's a veteran. And so we may be speaking specifically, or at certain points, it may sound like we're skewed towards the military side of the house, but we're just speaking about mental health and the challenges and the resources in general, right? Again, you can always find us at the Elite Sports and Entertainment Network on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. You can find us on YouTube at the Whiskey Hour Podcast. And hey, we're family. You're tuned in. Make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe. But once you watch this episode, we become family, man. So please, right now we're doing pre-recorded episodes, but in the future we'll be going live. We want that fan interaction, we want that family engagement. We want to hear from you in real time. So without further ado, Jason, kick us off, baby.
All right, thanks, Phil. I appreciate it. Like Phil said, I'm a former sergeant in the United States Army, so it really is kind of where I draw most of my stuff off of. But I also worked in the civilian side of life, so I can also draw off that as well. Like Phil said, we are talking about mental health and talking about specifically in the workforce and how that transcends. So I'm going to read this real quick. You can find this on Lyra. That's Lyra, lyrahealth.com. And it goes something like this. How does stigma affect mental health? As a result of stigma, many employees, also military service members, suffer in silence, right? Often for fear that their reputation, relationships, or job status could be in jeopardy if they disclose that they're struggling with their mental health or have a mental health condition. So what I want to say about that specifically is, a lot of times what it's saying is and I struggled with this at the very beginning of it too, until a younger NCO pulled me aside and talked to me a little bit about it. Is mental health, and we don't want to talk about it because it shows a vulnerability or a weakness, Phil. And I think a lot of times soldiers specifically, they don't want to say anything because they're fear that they're going to get backlash or bullied or harassed by their upper level management, or that they could prevent them from going to boards and things of that nature. And that's just got to stop, Phil. I think the Army's getting better about it. Now we're talking, they have a few classes, but I got to tell you, Phil, it seems to be, especially in the workforce, if you're in the workforce, if you feel like you don't have a way out of it, you feel like you're going to lose your job. And at that point, you just got, you have to do what you have to do, because at the end of the day, Phil, like, man, your mental health is all you have. And once you lose that, everything else kind of follows with it.
And that's big. And so before I even get started with my point, not to insult our fans, but the definition of stigma, right, is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. For example, the stigma of having gone to prison will always be with me. So like Jason said, man, mental health is huge, and there's so many different angles that we could talk about this, right? But one of the biggest areas is a lot of people don't understand, or they're not aware of when they're dealing with mental health issues, or when they're in cultures, or when they're part of organizations where their mental health is being challenged, right? Especially with the military, right? Because a lot of things are the norm, right? And so you don't know that it's a problem until someone brings it to your attention, right? Even if you're dealing with bullying, or you're dealing with racism, or you're dealing with rank, with people abusing their rank, right? It may be the norm to you. And so you don't even know that what you're dealing with is wrong, or you're not even aware of how it's impacting your day-to-day life. You're just like, man, I guess this is what it is. And like you said, that's so prevalent in the military. And before I even get started again, like we said last episode, right? These are strictly and solely our thoughts and opinions. These are not the thoughts and the opinions or the views of the United States Army, military, and any other affiliated branches, right? But yeah, back to the point. It's crazy. So like we were talking offline, right? One of the biggest things is just being aware of, hey, what I'm dealing with is not right. And it's impacting my mental well-being. But the first part of that piece is being able to recognize, hey, I'm not okay. And then that second point is starting to realize, okay, so what do I do now? Right? Because people are always saying, well, you have to talk about it or use your resources. But what does that look like, right? What does it look like for me to open up my mouth and say, I'm dealing with a mental health issue, right? So can you speak to that a little bit, Jason?
Yeah, a lot of it. I know when I was in the army, what I saw a lot was when you're dealing with the mental health issue, you don't really know, number one, who to turn to. So a lot of times if you don't know who to turn to, you either a bottle it up and deal with it internally, which leads to depression. And we all know, Phil, when you get stuck in a depressive mind, it's just never going to go right. If you don't have somebody to talk to you and help you get out of it, then where are you stuck at? A lot of times, if the depression can lead to suicide, thoughts of planning suicide, self-harm, all these things come to mind. When honestly, what we should be talking about is from a employer perspective or a senior NCO perspective, is we should be talking to our soldiers, especially when you see a difference in their patterns and the way they're doing things. The NCOs or employers should be talking to their soldiers to find out if there's things going on in their lives, because a lot of times the soldier or the employee is not just going to come forward with it because they're scared to come forward with it. But you know you're a soldier or your employees, and if you see something off, then it's up to us as leadership to address it and figure out what's going on so we can help them get through it. But the biggest thing, Phil, that I want to stress to that is the brain is an organ like anything else. It's like if I have a heart attack, oh my God, what do I do? Not go see a doctor, not tell somebody about it. No, you're gonna get 911, you're gonna get medical attention and pray to God you live. It's the same thing with mental health. The brain, if you don't treat it, it's just sickness like anything else. And that's the problem. We are not as leaderships, whether it be on the civilian side or the military side, we're not addressing that this is a real thing. This is a real illness, just like pneumonia, cancer, or anything else.
That's real. And I was thinking about something just now in my head. Like, so how do you help someone that's dealing with mental health issues, or right? How do you combat a culture that is conducive or that isn't conducive to positive mental health, right? And that's why I hate the thought process of like, or the phrase innocent bystander. To me, there's no such thing as an innocent bystander. If you're a bystander, first off, producing or creating a culture conducive to positive mental health, that's a team effort, right? That's a team effort. So again, if you're a bystander, you got to speak up and say something, right? If you see a young soldier, or I keep wanting to say soldier because we're in our military, but like if you see a person, right, that is that example, give me that's being bullied by a superior, right? Or who's
Right.
being forced to do things that are outside of the norm or what should be expected of them, right? You have to speak up and say something, right? And a lot of times people don't speak up because they're fear of retribution, right? They're afraid of what's going to happen to them if I speak up and address this issue that I see that my peers may be dealing with. And that's not okay, right? Sometimes you have to be willing to stand out in order to fit in, right? You have to be willing to make that personal sacrifice for the betterment of the team. And that's difficult because we're in a society that promotes the I, right? I have to win. I have to succeed. I have to be in charge. And there's no I in team, man.
Right.
I know
Yeah.
as cliche as
Yeah.
that sounds, but
And Phil, you look, we've been together for a hot minute, you and me. And you see me at my best and you see me at my lowest, and I will tell you, Phil, when I first met you and things, and how I was at that point in time, my frame of mind, how I was doing and things of that nature. And then we went over to Germany, and of course, that's when my ex-wife now left me and things like that. You saw how my whole world just got ripped out. And you saw where my mental health went. It went to a very, very, very dark place. It's a place I've never even knew that existed. And I got to tell you, when we talk about bystanders, Phil, there were bystanders, right? In upper level management, there were bystanders, but we also had our platoon leader at the time, which was our direct supervisor, who wasn't a bystander, who actually did take the time. And he knows who he is. He took the time to come to my rack, to talk to me, to find out what was going on. And I can't tell you how much that meant to have that level of leadership come to you and actually sit next to your rack and talk to you. That was huge. And of course, then you have your colleagues like Phil. He was my colleague who stepped in the gap and he helped me and let me talk to him and things like. And I know there were times when I drove Phil absolutely crazy, literally. But Phil, when you're in dark places like that, if you don't talk about it, what could have possibly happened? I will tell you, I have had thoughts of self-harm. I have tried to take my life. And I don't talk about this a lot. I don't, because it's a hard thing for me to talk about. But I've been there. I know what the darkest level of depression looks like. I do. And it will devour you in every way, shape, or form. You've got to get up off the couch. You've got to force yourself to do things, even when you don't want to, because if you don't, then you just sit there and you wallow. And the more you wallow, the more chances are likely that your attempts of suicide are going to dramatically increase.
Oh, 100%, right? And to your point about having, peers and leaders kind of step in on your behalf to help you out, right? I mean, on one hand, there's tons of different manuals and manuscripts and studies on how to prevent mental health issues and how to support people who are dealing with that, right? But there is no better manual outside of experience, right? When me and you were battle buddies and I was kind of helping you through what you were going through, I mean, that was my first time being in that position, right? It's not like I was intentionally saying, right, okay, Phil, this is what Jason's dealing with. This is how to best help Jason. I just knew that, hey man, this guy's going through something. And it would suck to go through this alone, right? And if I could do anything, I'm gonna just be me. And who I am as a person is just a caring person, a loving person, a helpful, a teammate, right? Because as a kid, I used to get bullied. I dealt with being in violent situations and circumstances. So what would I want someone to do for me? You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times you do have people who help others for personal gain, but I know I'm not that kind of person, right? I want to help you because that's the kind of person I am. And what you're
Right.
speaking about a second ago, Jason, were like pillars, pillars for positive mental health, right? So what I mean by that is like, what are some things that are needed in order to foster a positive mental health, right? So having a secure family environment, right? Because if the family ain't right, you ain't right, right?
Yeah.
Having a great work culture where everyone's respectful, right? There's no racism, there's no sexism, there's no gender bias. I mean, obviously it happens. I'm speaking my best case scenario, though, right?
Yeah.
So having a good family structure, having a positive working environment, having friends that you can rely on, having leaders that you can depend on to do the right thing, right? It's amongst a plethora of other things, right? But it is certain things that you need in order to help you maintain that personal health. On top of, I'm a Christian. I believe in God, so that's a huge pillar to my
Oh, absolutely.
well-being.
Absolutely.
Um, Going to the gym, right? Working out is another way that I decompress. It's how I kind of relieve any stress and tension. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me focused. So I guess what I'm getting at is we also have to look internally and kind of figure out, okay, what is it that I need in order to keep my compass calibrated, right? In order to keep myself on the straight and narrow, right? But you certainly can't do it alone. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, and what I'd like to do, what I think needs to be done, we've talked about, the stigma of mental health and things like that. But I think what the biggest thing what I'd like to see come out of this show is hopefully maybe an employer will see this. Hopefully maybe even somebody in the military will see this and take it to heart. But I think, there's some things that really need to happen in order to foster the kind of, workplace environment that can be conducive to a healthy mental health or getting mental health right. The first thing I think needs to be happening is we need to shift our perspective. We need to shift our perspective in the workforce. I'm just going to say workforce right now because workforce could be everything. The workforce needs to understand that mental health is, number one, a real thing. It is a real illness, just like any other illness that you may have. They need to recognize that as a legitimate illness and stop saying that, oh, it's just this or that, or it's somebody's opinion. No, it is a real thing, and it needs to be talked about. And it needs to be dealt with at that level, right? So the second thing I think needs to happen is we need to teach, or the leaders, whether you be an A-line supervisor, a B-line supervisor, whatever your supervisor rank is, we need to teach those supervisors to recognize the distress signals. I think the biggest thing for me was, I had upper level management not recognizing that there's something wrong with Jay. His personality has changed. There's a lot of things that have changed. He's not acting like he normally acts. So notice it, and Phil,
It's
you
like
noticed it.
technical
Uh,
difficulties, maybe.
yeah, like like you recognized it. Our platoon leader recognized it, but anybody above the platoon leader level really didn't recognize it, and that's a problem. So we need to get our leaders to start recognizing when their soldier isn't acting like he normally acts, so we can figure that out at the very early stages of it, so you can get him help and get him right. The second
And
thing is
hold
we
up,
need to
Jay.
encourage.
Hold up, Jay.
Oh,
Not
yeah,
not to cut you off, but you hit on a good point, right?
yeah. You're muted. You're muted, Bubba.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, a bigger issue is that a lot of leaders just don't care, right? So we talk about
Yeah,
leaders being able to
yeah.
recognize it, but a lot of them just don't care. So now what we're talking about is toxic leadership, and we really need to just get rid of that. And that's a whole different issue. But go ahead, Jason.
No, no, trust me. You're right. You hit the nail right on the head. You actually have to care, and that really is part of being a leader. If you don't care about your subordinates, then are you really a leader, or are you just a guy occupying a space to get a higher pay scale, but not really putting the work in where it needs to be put in? That's a good point, and I appreciate you saying that. We need to encourage open communication and sharing of personal stories. That's the biggest thing right there. If you care about your soldiers or your employees, you're going to encourage the open communication. Hey, I notice you're not looking right, man. Can you talk to me? Is there something going on that maybe I can help you with, or at least get you some resources? Just care and encourage the open communication, because sometimes people aren't going to tell you everything verbally, but they will tell you visually when something's not right. And so we need to look at that open communication and really get that back into the workplace. Second or thirdly, you need to eliminate discriminatory behavior. How many times have you seen, oh well, that dude's just, he's just being lazy, or I don't know, whatever they say. I don't want to say some things that has been said to me, because frankly, I don't want to curse on this show. But you know when bad things are being said. Oh, well, you're just making this up, or no, you don't really have a problem, or get your act together. What's your issue? You look, when somebody is saying bad things, and all that's going to do is more perpetuate whatever mental health they're having. That's just going to even make it worse. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. So we need to be able to eliminate that discriminatory behavior, and we need to catch it at the root. Like you said, Phil, toxic leadership or toxic environments in the workplace. That's the biggest thing we got to eliminate as well. We need to commit to using non-stigmatizing language. I hate that. Is when somebody stigmatizes you. I guess like negative comments, right? Like, oh, he's just making this up, or it's an affliction, or I guess using, and here it says it's using person first language, or emphasizing someone's humanity over their health challenges, like, things like that, Phil. Those are some of the things. I guess the last one was value psychological safety. I think people need to value that. If your mind's not right, like I said, it can lead to physical thoughts of suicide or things of that nature. And that's the last thing you want. You don't want people cutting on themselves, which is another thing to look out for. If you see people cutting on, or if you see marks in their hands that don't look right, you need to be able to see that. And if you see it, then you need to talk to them and ask them about it. Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed or bashful to ask somebody if something don't look right, because that may be their only way to let you know that something's wrong with them.
So I'm gonna hit you with, and those were all great points, Jason. I'm gonna hit you in the fans with two quotes or two phrases. One is from Remember the Titans, and one is another Armyism, right? So remember the Titans. The quote is, or the phrase is, "Attitude is a reflection of leadership," and the Armyism is, it starts at the top, right? So what does that mean, right? Attitude is a reflection of leadership. Culture is a reflection of leadership. Behaviors is a reflection of leadership, right? If you have leaders that don't address certain things, it becomes the culture. If you have leaders that don't set standards, it becomes the culture, right? It becomes the norms in which we abide by and live by every single day. And now you're taking isolated incidents and making it who we are, right? And it starts at the top, is what I just said, leaders, right? What is a leader? In the Army, we started this initiative. I want to say, what is 2024? maybe 2019, 2020, 2021-ish, called This Is My Squad. And what it is it's a mantra, it's a way of life, right? This is my squad. In the army, you have your divisions or your brigades, and you have your battalions, and you have your companies. Within the company, you have your platoons. Within each platoon, you have squads, right? And your squad consists of what? 4 to 5 members, your squad leader, your team leader, and then your subordinate soldiers, right? So this is my squad. What it pretty much means is I know everything about my squad, which makes them tick, which makes them sad, their needs, their wants, their desires, their goals, their families, when's their birthday, how old were they when they had their first scrape on their knee, right? All that pertinent information that allows for you to be able to recognize when something's not right with them, right? Mm-hmm. And so as leaders, you have to be able to recognize, like Jason said earlier in the episode, right? You have to be able to recognize those mannerisms, right? If they normally come to work jubilant every single day, but today they're quiet and reserved, that's a red flag, right? If they normally come to work quiet and reserved, and maybe today they're loud and outspoken, that might be a red flag as well, you know? And sometimes you don't see the red flag, so you have to dig a little deeper. And of course, some of your subordinates may not like that, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily your job to be liked, but it's your job and your responsibility to care for your team. And sometimes that comes with tough love, and sometimes that comes with tough conversations, right?
Right.
And like I said earlier, man, there's a bunch of different manuscripts and studies and books about how to be a leader, but ultimately, what it comes down to is experience. And personally, I've learned more from my bad or my toxic leaders than I learned from my good leaders, right? And I always wanted to be the person that that treated my soldiers or gave my soldiers what they needed, right? I had a brain fart for a second. Oh yeah, so I used to always joke back in my this is after our time together, Jason. But when I was in Fort Carson, or actually I guess before our time, I would always joke and be like, "Look, team, if we all banded together and said we're not doing this, they can't punish us all, right?" So it's have that
you know what
similar
I'm saying?
mindset.
Hey.
If we all agree that what's going on isn't right, it may force them to take notice and make a change, right? But if we don't have the intestinal fortitude, and I don't use that word loosely, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to be able to stand up in the face of what's wrong. And I mean, not saying that everybody doesn't have that courage, but again, to have that courage and to stand up for what you believe in could come with a lot of consequence, a lot of retribution. So again, I don't say this loosely, but it takes a lot of intestinal fortitude at times to stand up in the face of danger and look danger in the eye and say, I'm not afraid of you. And this is not right. And I want to make a change, right? But it's also easier when you have your team together and you're on the same page. So I used to always joke with my squad, like, look, man, they can't give us all Article 15s, right? So
yeah, right. Hey, you ain't lying though. Hey, it's either that or it's gonna be a long day.
well, hey man, I'm down for whatever.
But you know, Phil, I was again, I went to this website, it's called hsi.com, and it has to do with health services and things like that. And some of the things they say, I mean, some of them seem common sense, but sometimes common sense ain't always common. But the one thing you want to do is normalize the conversation, man. If somebody's coming to you and they say they're having mental health issues, don't treat them or don't ostracize or make them feel weird. Just normalize it. Encourage the open discussion. Thank them for coming to you about it, because the easier you make it for them, the more they're going to open up, the more they're going to tell you, and the more they're going to tell you, the easier it is to fix the problem. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge, what you don't know about. So normalize the conversation. Number 2, practice emotional intelligence. And what that means, being self-aware to social issues that may be going on with your employee, and then raise awareness about resources. That's the biggest thing. A lot of times we don't know where to go, and I think as employers, they're not going to know where to go maybe either. So find out the resources. So if you come across, especially with HR departments, all the HR departments, I promise you, any HR department is going to have resources. Just go to your HRs. They will be able to help you. That's their job. Like counselors and behavioral health and the military, HR in the civilian world, they have the resources. Just reach out to your resources, because again, if I cut off my hand, do I just sit there and look at it and try to figure out what to do by myself? Or do I go to the ER and get the proper treatment. Well, I'm going to go to the ER. Well, if I'm going to go to the ER, why would I not go to behavioral health? That's what we call it in the military, and or your psychological counselors out there in the civilian workplace. They all have them. I promise you. You just got to tap in to those resources.
Hey, Jay, and before you move on, let me go back to that first point, right? You said to normalize the issue, right?
Yeah.
And it takes a certain level of nuance, right? Because you want to treat it with the appropriate amount of seriousness that it deserves, right? But you also don't want to make it such a deal to where now they feel awkward or afraid, right? So be relatable, right? Let them know,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
you know, you're not alone in this. I've dealt with this. Give them some real world experience. Let them know that you are not by yourself. And this is what I did, and this is what we can do for you, right? And together as a team, we can make it through this, right? But you have to be relatable, right? So yeah, I want to hit on that before we move on too far.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing, you know, and I don't know. I think the military has finally caught on to it but now it's much, much, much more prevalent now to go see mental health and get those things done at behavioral. So I do want to acknowledge the military for now changing that or starting the transition of changing from a society that wouldn't talk that now encourages you to talk. And if there's any employers out there that aren't doing that, then I strongly encourage you to do that, because here's the deal. If your employees are healthy mentally and physically, your production is going to show it. Same thing with the military. If you're healthy up here and you're healthy physically, you know, the teamwork, the production you're trying to get out of your soldiers, it's all going to all that stuff reflects. But when it's not right, then it reflects the other way too. So keep that in mind as well.
That's real. And I know I stated this earlier, but I just want to make sure it's clarified. These are myself and Jason's opinions based off of our experience in and outside of the military. This is not indicative of the military's beliefs or anything like that. This is strictly our own thoughts and our own opinions based off our experiences. But I mean, you're 100% right, man. At the end of the day, there are resources available to us, and like you said, right. On one hand, it's knowing about the resources, and then on the other hand, it's knowing how to access those resources. Right. Half the battle is knowing.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
and you brought up a good site that you were listing off some great points. What's that website again, Jason?
It's hsi.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I pull most of it off of it. So yeah, just go to hsi.com, or maybe even hsi.com. Sometimes that I looks like a one. I had to verify that. Yeah, it's HSI, Hotel Sierra India.com. And I think you'll find it there. I just want to close with this. You know, there was, like I told you, when I went through what I went through in Germany, I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of embarrassment. I felt a lot of regression. I felt all kinds of things. And if it wasn't for, you know, my colleague, like, you know, Phil, or if it wasn't for my platoon sergeant and platoon leader, though, if it wasn't for those three individuals specifically, I don't know where I'd be. I don't know if I would have made it out of Germany, because I was really getting to a point where I was really having some really, really, really bad thoughts. And I just want to say, I'm a living proof that when you talk about it, when people care enough about you to talk about it, you can resolve it, you can get better. But if you don't talk about it, then it's not going to get better. It's like any other illness in your body. It's only going to get worse over time. So you really have to talk. That's the biggest. You have to, number one, foster an environment to allow people to talk. And then number two, the person themselves has to be willing to talk. And that all comes from fostering that culture in your environment, from leadership to the people around you to yourself. I mean, like you said, it's a team, you know, Phil. Ultimately, it's a team.
And that's real. And I can't speak too much to the civilian side of the house, right? 'Cause I know, or I can make the assumption that they have certain rules and certain guidelines in place that may restrict you, or that, you know, there's different ways of working, right? But for the military, man, and this is another mantra that I kind of live by, and I think I got this from Bob Marley, but it's like, be the change that you want to see in the world at the end of the day, right? And don't do it with the expectation of receiving something in return, right? I don't help, or I'm not a good person because I want someone to say thank you, Phil, or great job, Phil, or you're awesome today, right? I do it because I care.
But I want to point out I just want to touch on what Phil is saying. There's going to be good days and bad days. And when you're going through your good days, everything is great. But when you're going through your bad days, that's really when, you know, you need to have people around you that can help pick you up by the bootstraps. But you have to also want to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. and move on. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it is a total team effort, but it really has to be within that person to be able to talk about what's going on inside themselves.
I guess, Jason, we'll close with this, man. At the end of the day, right, as a bystander, if you see something, say something, right? If you see a friend in need, be a friend that helps. And if you're a leader, care, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the biggest thing I want to now, this one I do want to say for the military specifically. If you're in the military, make sure you're going to mental health. If you know that you have an issue or you know something's not right within yourself, don't be afraid to go to behavioral health. Let your leadership know, hey, there is something going on with me. I need to get this rectified. Can I please go make an appointment at behavioral health? And then go make that appointment. And then make sure you meet your appointment. And then make sure you're involved in your appointment. Make sure you're talking to your therapist about your issues. Don't hold anything back. That is the time to have verbal diarrhea, so that way they can put everything into those records to get you the right help that you need, to get you on the right medications, the right psychiatrist, everything that you need to facilitate you getting back to a healthy state of mind. So don't be afraid. And then also please make sure you're going to behavioral health and getting all that into your records, because when the time comes and you do leave the Army, you're going to need those records. So when you want to continue your mental health, whether it be at the VA or whether it be on a private sector, those records are a great thing to give to your new counselor. So that way it just gives them more background on you that you may or may not even be remembering. So keep all of your records, document everything. So that way, when you get out, you have a good history that when you go to your next primary care doctor or behavioral health person, you can really give them an accurate depiction of where you are, other than just what you happen to remember in your brain.
And just to double tap, right, to foot stomp, to emphasize this point too, don't minimize what you're going through, right? I'm horrible at this, right? I'm not good at talking about myself. I'm not good at praise, but I'm also not good at like really internalizing and looking at what I'm dealing with. So if you're going through anything, right, you may think it's small, but it may be a big issue. It may be a big deal, right? So don't minimize what you're going. Like Jason said, have diarrhea of the mouth and just start speaking. And once you start speaking, and then you have that conversations, you realize, oh wow, like I was dealing with that, and then you'd be like, oh wow, I overcame that, right? So, your mental health is extremely important, as well as the mental health of others. So, just be the change you want to see in the world, right?
Be the change. You hit it
And
right on the nail.
this is probably going to be one of my favorite episodes, Jason, right here, and we're definitely going to hit this topic again, right? It's not a one time deal. We're definitely going to hit it again. We may even have some experts on the line with us as we continue to just dig deeper into certain topics. Again, it's not just a sports podcast or a sports network. We talk sports, we talk life, leadership, health, wealth, anything you could think of, anything you can think of, right? But once again, thank you for joining myself, Phil, and my battle buddy Jason McLovin, Jay McLovin. This is the Whiskey Hour podcast, and you are now a part of the family. So we'll see you again next week, and be blessed, brothers and sisters.